Hi, I'm Catherine and I'm going to be your teacher for today. Here at Prime Pass we have put together some really easy and simple tutorials for you to create a masterpiece in the comfort of your own home. So before we start, get yourself comfortable, put on some music, get a drink and get ready to get creative. So what you will need for your painting is everything in your pack. You have 12 acrylic paints. You have 2 brushes, you have a flat brush, which is the medium brush, and you have a smaller brush, which is the pointed brush. You have your palette, where you're going to put your paints on. You have your canvas board. And what you'll need is kitchen towel, an old sponge, and a cup of water. So once you have all your materials ready, we're going to start painting. In this tutorial, we're going to be painting Lantern by Night with a cherry blossom tree and falling petals. So when you're ready, we're going to start to prepare our paints and palette. So to paint Lantern by Night, you can set up your materials in front of you like this. So you have your water cup, you have your kitchen sponge, your paper towels, your paint palette, your brushes, your canvas and your paints. To paint this particular painting, we're going to be using 4 colours. We're going to be using blue, yellow, black and white. So I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to squirt a little blob in my palette, and I'm going to do the same with the black. So you can really space out your colours, you don't have to have them all kind of bunched together. It's nice to spread out the colours so there's plenty of room to do your mixing. And you can also keep adding to your palette as and when you run out. So you can start off with little blobs at a time and then you can keep adding to them. So once you have your paint prepared, we can start painting the picture. So for the night sky in our painting, we're going to be using a slightly darker blue than the blue that we have on our palette. So to mix a slightly darker blue, we're going to take our larger brush and we're going to get a scoop of blue and put it in the dish next to it. And then we're going to take a little bit of black and mix that to the blue. So with the black you can go little by little, don't add too much at a time. And that is the dark blue that we're aiming to get. Okay, so we can wash our brush in our water to get off that colour. And then once your brush is nice and clean, you can just put it to the side. And then we're going to take our kitchen sponge and we're going to dip it into our water to make it damp and just squeeze off some of the excess. And then we're going to dip into our blue and we're going to use the sponge as though we would a paintbrush. So the idea is to cover the whole canvas with the blue. So we're going to do big, almost strokes with the blue, and you can keep dipping it into the paint as and when you need it. And the idea is to cover lots of surface area quickly. If you were to use one of the brushes, it would take a lot longer. So we use a sponge to cover lots of surface area and cover the whole canvas. And then once you're happy with the coverage, we can wait for our canvas to dry. Okay, so I'm going to take my larger brush again and I'm going to dip it into my water and dampen the brush. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit more blue into my mix and mix that in with the black. So now we're going to add the dark areas onto our canvas. So we're going to start in the corners and we're going to add our paint into the corners first. So I've taken some of the mix and I'm going to aim for the corners. When I'm painting, I'm almost kind of blobbing the paint on, so I'm using little strokes instead of larger strokes. And this creates a really nice texture. and you'll be able to see really lovely tones coming through. So I'm just aiming for the corners and the sides. And the idea is to create a kind of shadow, and it'll be a lot lighter in the middle. So when you're running out of paint, you can mix some more. So I'm going to take some more blue and put it back in my dish. And then I'm going to take some more black and add that to the mix. So keep mixing the paint as and when you need more. I'm also going to add some water as well, so I'm going to dip my brush in my water. And this will also help kind of spread the paint so it's nice and smooth, and will also help with the blending as well, because acrylic paints tend to dry quite quickly and it's slightly more difficult to blend when the paint is drying out. So if you add water to your paint, it will be a lot easier to blend with the colours that we're going to be adding a bit later on. Okay, so now we're going to mix a slightly lighter blue this time. So I'm going to take a scoop of this dark blue and I'm going to put it into the dish next to it. And then I'm going to add some white. I'm going to slowly start to lighten up this blue. I'm also going to add a bit of water in there as well.
More white.
And then I'm going to add that onto the canvas. And when you're adding the paint, you might decide that it's not light enough or it's too dark. So you can always kind of keep sort of playing around with the colour, keep mixing until you're happy with the tone. And I'm still using those small kind of dabby strokes again to blend with the blue. So now we're going to lighten that up even more. So I'm going to grab some more white and add that to the mix. And then I'm going to start to kind of really build up the light tones towards the middle. Keep adding some water as well. This really helps with the blending. Okay, so we're just going to bring that colour into the middle and fill in the middle part of the canvas. Keep adding water. So now what you can do is you can just wipe your brush on a bit of tissue and get off some of that excess paint. And with an almost kind of dryish brush, you can work back in and start blending a little bit more. So the idea is to kind of tone down some of these kind of harsher tones that are next to each other and just almost kind of get rid of that divide between the two colours. Okay, so there we have our background colour painted in. Okay, so when your canvas is dry, we're going to mix up a light yellow, which is going to go into the middle, and that's going to be kind of our point of light. So because we're mixing up quite a light yellow, if you want to change your water, so you don't start making green, and you can dip your brush in your water to dampen it, so we're ready to start mixing the light yellow. At this point, if you want to add some more white to your palette, because as you're mixing you will slowly start to kind of get other colours into your blobs of paint, so do make sure that you're kind of replenishing your paint and you're not getting too many colours in there. That will just make it easier for mixing. So I'm going to grab my brush, I'm going to dry it on my tissue just to make sure it's nice and clean, and then I'm going to take some yellow and I'm going to put that in the dish next to it, and then I'm going to take some white. So quite a lot of white, you can really dunk your brush, get a good scoop of white and mix that with the yellow. And then when you're happy with that tone of yellow, we're going to add it into the middle of our canvas. So I'm going to just take off some of that excess paint and we're going to go little by little. And I'm going to use those same kind of little, kind of almost blobby strokes again, like we did with the background. And I'm going to add in our patch of yellow. If you want to dip into your water, just to spread the paint a bit more easily, you can. You can swish your brush in the water. And then same again, if you just wanted to take off some of that excess and use your tissue just to get some of that paint off. And then you can use an almost dry-ish brush to blend out some of that yellow into the background and to kind of soften those tones up a bit. So now I'm going to add just a tiny bit more yellow. So I'm going to dip my brush back into the yellow and then add that to the mix. So now we've made a slightly darker tone there, and then I'm going to do a few blobs in the lantern. And I'm using those same kind of little blobby strokes again. And also if you want to dip into the white and then add pure white over the top, that will create kind of like a really bright light. And you can go quite thick with the paint in this area. You don't have to go sparingly, you can go quite thick. And then depending on how kind of light you want your lantern to be, you can just keep adding white paint. And then when you're happy with that tone of yellow, you can wait for that to dry. So before we start painting the lantern, I'm just going to wash off my brush in the water to get off some of that yellow. And then I'm going to dry my brush in my tissue. And then just put that to the side. To draw our lantern, I'm going to use a pencil because you can be a lot more precise with a pencil for drawing your lines first before you start going in with your paintbrush. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to draw 2 lines, which is going to be the top and the bottom of the lantern. So it doesn't matter too much about these pencil lines because we're going to have the paint over the top. It's just kind of guidelines for you so you know where it's going to be. And then the 2 lines at the side are kind of a bit curved and they kind of bulge outwards a little bit. Try and get them as kind of symmetrical as possible. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect, but kind of really take your time with it. Decide how kind of big you want your lantern to be, or if you want a smaller lantern. It's completely up to you. So once you're happy with the shape of your lantern, we can start to paint black over the top of these lines that we've just drawn. I'm going to switch to the small paintbrush so we can be a lot more precise with where we're adding our paint. I'm just going to dip my brush in my water so the paint kind of clings onto the brush a little bit more easily. I'm just going to dab off some of the excess on my tissue. I'm going to dip into the black, and you can go little by little with the paint, so don't dunk your brush too much. Just get a little bit of black on your paintbrush. And then really take your time with it. You can rest your hand against your canvas, so it's nice and supported, and you can really take your time with those lines. When you're adding your paint, if you feel like the paint isn't really kind of spreading very easily, you can dip your brush in your water, and then your paint will kind of flow a bit more freely. So before we start painting our trees, I'm just going to rinse off my brush in the water and get off some of that black paint. And then I'm just going to dry that onto my tissue and put my paintbrush aside. And then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to draw in my trees first, so I know exactly where the branches are going to be before we start adding the paint. So I'm going to do my main branch coming from the top left-hand corner, and it's going to come downwards. It's quite a large branch that's going to come down, and you can have your branches wherever you want them to be, but it might be nice to have kind of a larger branch that kind of takes over most of the painting, and then you can draw your little lines coming off of your main branch with little lines. Okay, so when you've chosen where your branches are going to be with your pencil, we're going to take the small paintbrush again, and I'm just going to dip it into my water and just dry it slightly on the tissue, and then I'm going to dip into my black paint. And again, I'm not using too much paint, so I'm not dunking my brush. I'm just going to get a little bit of paint on there. And then same again, you can rest your hand on your canvas. And I'm going to start off in the top left-hand corner, and I'm going to paint over where I've just drawn with my pencil. So we're just drawing over the top of those pencil lines. So now we're going to add our wire to make it look like our lantern is hanging. I'm going to use one of the top branches to start to paint in the wire, and that is just a line coming down that meets with the circle. So before we start painting in our cherry blossom flowers, I'm just going to wash my brush in the water. to take off some of that black paint. And I'm just going to wipe my brush in my tissue. So to do the cherry blossoms, I'm going to dip into the white, and I'm just going to take a little bit of paint at a time, so not too much. And at the end of each branch that we just painted is where I'm going to add my cherry blossom flower. So to do the cherry blossoms, we're going to paint in 5 little strokes of white, almost like a star shape. And you can rest your hand against your canvas and be really precise. And we're going to add those at the end of each branch. You can choose how big you want your flowers to be, or if you want kind of very little delicate flowers, it's completely up to you. I've gone for quite small flowers, but the idea is just to do little brush strokes, almost like little stars, and I'm just going to add those to the end of each branch. Okay, so once you've painted in all your flowers, I'm just going to add a few falling petals in our gaps, and that's just little strokes of white paint to make the impression that the petals are falling, and it adds just a little bit of kind of movement to the painting. These are kind of nice little details which you can add. It's completely up to you how many petals you'd like falling. You can do lots, you can do a little bit, however many you want to do. And I'm just going to add a few just in our space over here on the right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some highlights to our branches, and I'm going to mix up a kind of a light grey. So I'm going to take some white and I'm just going to put it in one of the palettes, and I'm going to take a little bit of black, not too much, and I'm going to add that to the white to create a nice light grey. You can always add a little bit more white just to create more paint. So once you've mixed quite a lightish grey, you might even want to add just a little bit more white in that. I'm just going to take off some of the excess paint using the edge of the dish. And then I'm going to add this light grey to the right hand side of some of our branches. You don't have to do it the whole way down. You can also add some water as well into your mix, just to make sure your paint kind of spreads really easily. And the idea is just to add a little bit of highlight in some areas of the branches. So when you're happy with your highlights, I'm just going to wash off my brush in the water, and then we'll add the remaining detail to the cherry blossom flowers. Okay, so now we're going to add the finishing touches to our painting, and we're going to add tiny little dots in the middle of our cherry blossom flowers to give the finishing detail. So I'm going to take my small brush again, and I'm going to dip into the yellow. So not too much paint, just a little bit of paint. And very simply, I'm just going to add a little dot in the centre of each cherry blossom flower. Okay, so there we have our lantern by night all completed. You're welcome to carry on going, you're welcome to add things, maybe add some more branches or add some more highlights, or you can add even more flowers if you wanted to. You can even experiment with the colours, so if you wanted to do it again, try thinking about adding different colours. And there we have it, our cherry blossom flowers. I hope you've enjoyed painting Lantern by Night today, and I hope you got your creative juices flowing and tried something new today. Do check out more of our tutorials at Prime Pass. We have a whole array of paintings for you to choose from, and I hope to see you next time for more painting.